Well, good morning. Welcome to the 22nd annual Arkansas Holocaust Education Conference. The AHEC was formed in 1990 around the idea that it is imperative that our nation's teachers develop a dialogue with students dealing with the deeply complex and emotional issues and historical perspective that surround the Holocaust, as well as similar concerns that arise from existing polarization within the world today. We started this conference based on the idea that bigotry, discrimination, racism, and prejudice can be partially mitigated through education. Of course, the conference wouldn't be possible without help from our sponsors, so I want to take a minute and thank Temple Shalom, Temple Yetz Haim, John Brown University, the Arkansas Humanities Council, and of course our largest sponsor, and none of this could be possible without the support of the Jewish Federation of Arkansas. So thank you to all of you for making this possible. Just a quick side note, this year the AHEC lost one of our members, Mrs. Dorothy Reif, passed away this year. She was a wonderful person, a wonderful member of the Northwest Arkansas community, and a wonderful artist. So I'd like to thank everybody who sent memorials on her behalf and just say that she will be dearly, dearly missed. In Holocaust studies, the term Nie wieder comes up often. It often accompanies lectures, presentations, and discussions on the subject. Nie wieder, never again. One would hope that in our modern world there's no room for further genocide based on ideas of racial or ethnic superiority, religious discrimination, or ultra-nationalistic tendencies. But all too often, that hope is sadly not a reality. In fact, just this week, we were reminded again of why Holocaust studies are so imperative in the international milieu with the story of Erich Priebke. Erich Priebke was an SS officer who passed away this week. He was 100 years old, and he was finishing a life sentence under house arrest in Rome for probably the worst genocide of Roman Jews under German-occupied Italy. He was denied funeral in Rome. They tried several different places and finally found a small church outside of Rome where protesters clashed over whether or not he could have a funeral. Now, while part of this gives hopes that we haven't forgotten, the other part of this is that there were still ultranationalistic neo-Nazi parties that showed up to push this. When asked about the protests, one of the Jewish community leaders of Rome, Renzo Gattegna, stated, "Their followers are assassins of memory. They will never win." So this idea of Nie wieder is as important now as it has ever been. The theme of this year's conference is Hitler's non-German players, which raises the important question of how anyone could have helped, supported, or collaborated with the German Third Reich during the Nazi regime. There is no simple answer. Today, we will discuss many of these groups and their reasons for assisting Nazi Germany with its plan for worldwide domination and racial superiority. In Europe, anti-Semitism, nationalism, ethnic hatred, anti-communism, and opportunism induced citizens of nations Germany occupied to collaborate with the Nazi regime in the annihilation of European Jewry and with other Nazi racial policies. Such collaboration was a critical element in implementing the final solution and the mass murder of the other groups whom the Nazi regime targeted. Collaborators committed some of the worst atrocities of the Holocaust era. Germany's European Axis partners cooperated with the Nazi regime by promulgating and enforcing anti-Jewish legislation and, in some cases, by directly deporting their Jewish citizens and/or residents into German custody, en route to killing centers or labor camps. In some Axis states, fascist paramilitary organizations terrorized, robbed, and murdered indigenous Jews either under German guidance or on their own initiative. The Hlinka Guard in Slovakia, the Iron Guard of Romania, the Ustasa in Croatia, and the Arrow Cross in Hungary were responsible for the deaths of thousands of Jews in their home territory. In these and other states, military personnel, police, and the gendarmes played a key role in the expatriation, concentration, and deportation of Jewish residents in their countries. In Hungary, Slovakia, Croatia, Bulgaria, and Vichy France, the police, military, and gendarme officials were vital to implementing the German-initiated policy of deporting Jews resident in territories under their influence or control in the killing centers to the east. Lithuanians, Latvians, Estonians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians spontaneously formed groups which the German SS and police then purged and reorganized. From the beginning, many members of these partisan or self-defense groups killed hundreds of Jews, as well as real or perceived communists. Even the Irish Republican Army added their name to the list of the Nazis' collaborators, subscribing to the view that the enemy of my enemy is my friend in the struggle against perceived British occupation. The rationales of these collaborators, which ranged from self-preservation to historical anti-Semitism to twisted reasoning of faith, all contributed to the Nazi war effort and, in the end, to the Holocaust itself. Our keynote speaker today, Dr. Ann Millen from the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, could not be with us today due to the government shutdown. Even though on furlough, Dr. Miller had actually contacted us and had strongly considered coming anyway, but after being informed that this would probably end her tenure with the Holocaust Memorial Museum, we decided that maybe she should remain in Washington, D.C. But when one door closes, another opens. We have been extremely lucky this year to welcome not one, but two Holocaust survivors to our conference, Mr. and Mrs. Isaac and Riva Hirsch. So, in place of what would have been Dr. Millen's excellent keynote presentation, we have decided to let Mr. and Mrs. Hirsch each have their own session. As you listen to the stories and throughout your morning breakout sessions, I'd really highly encourage all of you to think about questions that might come up when we do the Q&A this afternoon. This is an unparalleled opportunity to hear these stories. Mrs. Riva Schuster Hirsch was born in Romania. She was separated from her family after being captured by the Germans in 1941. She was later rescued from a camp by partisans and spent 2 years hiding at a Catholic convent where she lived alone inside a tiny 6-foot square bunker. She met her future husband in Israel, and they were married in 1950. They moved to New York in 1962 and then on to Birmingham, Alabama in 1992 to be closer to their children and grandchildren. So please help me welcome Mrs. Riva Hirsch.
Good morning to all of you. I'm very happy to see beautiful students here and beautiful people that I met here. And I want to thank, first of all, to two wonderful people in the committee about bringing us out here, Dr. Smith and Jason Malloy, and the whole committee. We are here to tell a little bit about our life. Me and my husband, we have two different stories. We're from two different places. But anything you're going to hear today is the truth. The reason we are here, we want to make sure that denial will not go on anymore, because we have a lot of denial going on that a Holocaust never happened. Here you see two people alive. We are not tapes, we're not newspapers, we're not movies. When we will be gone, it's going to be history. So it's hard for us to stay in front and speak, but we decide so long we can, we be able to walk around and come to places to speak, especially for you students, to know what happened to my young life. I come from a place, it's called Novi Selac, which was between Romania, Russia, and Bukovina. I was 7 years old in 1941 when the war broke out. One night, we were sitting down in the house. Me, my father, mother, my two brothers, and my grandmother, my mother's mother. And we heard a knock in the door. One of my dad's friends came running to tell us that something bad is going on in the area. Now, this friend worked for my father. We had behind our home, we weren't rich, a little manufacturer. My dad was a foyer. He used to do mink coats, jackets, and Russian hats. And this gentleman worked for us. When my dad opened the door, he could have seen the sky gotten black, but he did not believe that anything is bad. So he left, the friend left, my dad came back into the house. He didn't want to scare us as children, but he told my mom and grandma, I don't know what's going on. They came tell us that something is going on, and I could see already in the sky that it's something bad going on. It didn't take too long, my friends. Another gentleman came in that worked for my family, and he said the same thing. He said, Joe, I want you to be prepared, because I don't think it's going to take you too long. You have to move away right away. He closed the door from his friend. He came in. He had no choice. They came in, my parents, my mom and my dad and my grandmother, and told us, listen, kids, we will not let you take any toys. Like I said, we weren't rich, but I had a doll, we had bicycles, we had a couple of things. My mom said nothing will be taken. The only thing we're going to take is the little packages that we and Grandma will wrap you up under your arm, and we're going to have to leave the house. They did give us some packages. We turned around, we opened the door, we left the house. I could have seen the tears in my parents' and my grandmother's eyes. But my dad turned around and said to us, I want you to kiss the mezuzah. We Jewish people have a believing to have the mezuzah on the door. And he said, the reason I want you to do that, I know that you're never going to come back to our home. And we left the house. It started getting dark. It started getting nasty. We went to a forest. We went to fields. While we were going, my parents said to each other, maybe we're going to call Joshua. Now, Joshua was another friend of my parents that worked for us, but he had a mill. And Dad said, maybe he's going to put us out with the kids because it's getting nasty. We don't know where we're going. But while we were in the forest, you could have heard the bombs flying over our heads. In fact, one of my cousins was hidden in the same forest, and she was hit by one of them, one of the bombs or what, and she passed away right there in the forest before anything happened. So we came to this door to his house. My dad and me, we saw a little light through the door. We knew that Joshua is in the house with his family. They knocked on the door. He did not open the door. So Mom went over and said to him, Joshua, it's me, Fega. I have my chain. I have my watch. I have my diamond. I want to give it to you. I don't think I'm going to need it anymore. So probably his heart broke. He did open the door. Mama ripped off everything from herself and gave it to him. But she said to him, Joshua, I want you to put me out with the children in your mail because it's getting nasty. We don't know where we're going. So he said to her, I can do it. I'm afraid. If they find out that we're hiding you, they're going to kill my family, which is true. It's the truth. If any of them would find out that they're hiding some Jewish people, they would kill them. But he let us stay in the mail. He took us. We went to a little bridge. We came to the mail in the darkness. We sat down. It didn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes. He came back running. He said, we have to leave. The SS is around his mail. We had no choice, my dear friends. We had to stand up, and again, we walking into the field, towards the fields, at night, hiding in the fields. Meantime, the packages that we had were gone. Our shoes were gone. We started getting filthy. But we walked. While we were walking at night, sitting in the fields and in the forest, my dad said to Mom, you know, maybe we go to Chotin. Chotin was my other set of grandparents living, and it was kilometers. It was no miles. In Europe, there is no, but it's pretty far. How are we going to make it? We start walking again to the forest, to the fields, and we walked. While we came to the end of one of the forests, guess what happened? They surrendered us. The Germans came with the motorcycles, with their leather boots, on horses, and they start ripping me apart from my mother. I hold on to her skirt. My 2 brothers was holding on to my father. They took us apart. They beat up my mother. They turned around the baguette to her head. They made her very, very sick. She lived through it, but she passed away. My father, they ripped apart and they threw him away. I didn't know where my 2 brothers were gone. Me, as a little girl, 7-year-old, had to observe what's going on there. I had no choice. And while they put me on line to walk, march, they put on me the yellow star, and they said, with the baguettes around us, if we're not going to walk or we pick up our heads, they're going to kill us. We had no choice. We start marching. We marched on, when I was marching, my feet stepped on dead bodies smaller than me that they had killed before we came to this place. Bodies were laying like piles and piles on the side. You could have seen animals ripping them apart. If you had a chance to look a little bit back, you could have seen the Germans ripping their skins apart. My fellow students and friends, anything you hear today is the truth. Because there is a lot of denial going on right now that Holocaust never happened. So I marched. I had no choice. Hungry, got filthy, full of lice. And I walked. I was a skeleton. And they took us to a place, it's called Sukarain. In Sukarain, they lined us up again, and they told us that a train will come and pick us up to a better place. They used to say, always, they're taking you to a better place. The train was not a regular train. It was a train, that cattle train. But they came with people from far away, from other places. They were already filled. They were already dead people. Before the train stopped, in front of my eyes, they opened the doors and they shot out the people, live or dead, children. When the train stopped, they picked me up by my braids, which they were filthy already, and they pushed me in, threw me in the train. Before that, they threw me on that wires. I have no number, but I have here all my face, all my hand that I was thrown on that wires. And I tell you about the wire. Some of my friends and teachers that we spoke had gone to our place, and they had found a little bit of a wiring right the place where I was thrown in. They came back and made a pin for me. They threw me into this train, and we were going pretty far. But in the train was awful. Excuse me. People went on themselves. There was nothing to wipe. Children were crying for their parents. Wives for their husbands. It was a mess. But again, we did not have a chance. We came to a place, it's called Mogilov in the Ukraine. They opened again the big doors, like I said. They start throwing out again people. And we stopped. And they threw out from the train, they put you straight on line. And they were staying next to you. And you had to stay and wait until they take you. And they turned around after everybody was thrown out from the train that still had a lived life in them. They told us again, we have to march. We came to a place from the train that it's called Mogilov. Mogilov was a Dniester. It was a river. The people could not go there with a car or without a ferry. What they did, I find this out after the war, they stole the doors, they stole the gates, they stole the plywoods from the people's homes, and they made like little ferries to transfer the people. They gave out numbers. Again, I was lucky. God wanted me to be able to stay in front of you all to tell the story, how sick I was with malaria, but I pulled it through. The people that went in the morning, their numbers came in the morning, and I know for a fact, my two uncles with their family were drowned. They opened this in the middle, and they drowned thousands and thousands of children and parents and families in that Dniester. Again, my number came to come in the morning. They moved me over with that ferry to the Ukraine. It's called Luchenets. Luchenets was the camp. It was not like Warsaw ghetto, but it was a ghetto. I couldn't walk anymore. I crawled. I was a skeleton. And I crawled over, and they pushed me in that side of the camp. And while I walked in, I was laying down in a corner, barely breathing. And I was laying there more dead than alive, and I didn't care. I said, if they kill me or I die, I'm dead anyway. And I was laying down, and one day, a man came by. He turned me over. And I couldn't understand German, because German is a little similar to Jewish. And I just spoke Jewish in my home. And he said to me, "Play dead. You are dead." He put his hand on my mouth. He picked me up. He carried me on his shoulder. And he ran with me. He ran pretty far. But I didn't know where. And like I said, I did not care. What happened was, he had a wagon. That wagon was filled with hay. Very high build up. He took me, he had a little opening. He pushed me in under this hay. It was a little tiny just for me to breathe. I couldn't breathe anyway. But he said to me again in German, "I want you to know, I know they're going to stop the wagon. You not laughing, not crying, not speaking. You are dead." And I know for a fact the SS had stopped my wagon, but they did not go under. They did not check. Again, God wanted me to be there. And he drove with me to a place which is called Tulchin in the Ukraine. It was pretty far. I was laying there, really almost dead. We came in the night. He tried to pull me out from behind the hay. He put me again on his shoulders. And he started looking around. And he said to me again in German, nothing, not a voice, nothing come out from your mouth. And I didn't know where he's taking me. All of a sudden, became two big gates open. And he gave me over, me as a Jewish little girl. Now they know, I didn't know in our town what a nun means. I saw a young lady coming out with a white little thing on her head. I don't remember the color of her uniform. He threw me into her arms. And she started running with me. And she ran with me pretty far away from their place, from the two gates, from the convent. We came to this place. She opened a little door and said to me, you're going to have to be here. We're going to try to come. We can't come every day because we are afraid that they're going to come and check. But we're going to try to bring you some food. I was laying in that bunker. I find out after the war that they had built more than one, that they had hidden a couple of young girls. Each was separate, so we couldn't have noise. My dear friends, they bought me some food. They threw it in. I was so sick. Like I said, the lights was my lunch, my meat, money, and dinner. I couldn't take it, couldn't see, but I knew they threw in the food. When I turned around, it was gone. I was laying with rats, and all kind of stuff came in. And I was laying there like a rabbit. My back broke. I lost my teeth. I lost my vision. I lost everything. My feet were bleeding. And I was laying there. I find out the dates because I didn't know what dates they were. One day, another nun came running, ripped off the little door, and said to me, my dear child, and I understood a little bit again, like because they were talking German. You have to leave. You are free. And I didn't know what it means. She took me out from that little bunker, took me into their quarters. She started cleaning me up a little bit. She started giving me tie my feet with some cloth. My feet were bleeding. And she said, you are free. I didn't know what it means. So she saw that I don't understand. She took me up to the same gate that they brought me in. And she said, now you have to go. Where is a young kid like me going? For 2 years I was there. Where do I go from 1943 till 1945? I was laying there. And like I said, I was a skeleton. I couldn't walk, so I started crawling. And slowly I made it to a place and a site, and I was laying there. Yesterday I didn't tell you all about that. And I was laying there for a good day. And again, I was more dead than alive. All of a sudden, 2 people came by with their self from another lager, from another camp. They themselves were skeletons. They themselves were filthy. They themselves had no clothing. So one says to the other, let me turn her over. Maybe she's still alive. And I opened slowly a little bit my eyes. And he said to her, yes, she's still jipping. That means I'm still breathing. They turned me over again. They bent down themselves. They couldn't even walk themselves. They picked me up on their back like a backpack. They were running with me. They were gone with me, and they said to me, we are Jewish. We are also survived that misery from another place. We wouldn't let you lay there. I don't want the Germans or the dogs to heat you up. I want you to come with us, but we cannot carry you too much, because they themselves were sick. But let me tell you what happened. A miracle. Another gentleman came by with a carriage, and you know in Europe the carriages have long tailpipes. The man that carried me on his back took me off. And while he was driving, he hooked me up on that tailpipe. I was going pretty far with him, hanging on. How I had the strength is just God. I did not know how I was holding down to that, and I was hanging on in the back of his carriage. And I was going pretty far with him. He didn't know I'm hanging in until somebody came across. He gave him a signal that somebody's hanging in his tailpipe. He took a whip and he whipped me, and I fell back. He kept on going, and I was falling back and laying in the middle of the road. I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't walk anymore. Finally, slowly, I crawled over again, not too far from the road. The same two men made it. They saw me again. They were sure that I'm ahead of them. They find me again. And again, he couldn't walk. He schlepped me and became slowly resting. He said to me, we have nothing to be afraid anymore. The Germans are not here. We're going to stay until we're going to make it. Where are you going to make it? It's called Czernowitz. The place Czernowitz was Bukovina. Now, Czernowitz was one of the richest, I should say, like Manhattan, the richest like in Bukovina. They were very rich people there. They had big stores, from Persian carpets, drapery, all kind of stuff. They were very, very well off. What I did find out, that when the Germans came into Czernowitz, they had taken their quarters in the places